nobody likes to feel out of control. But the funny thing is, control is really just a state of mind. So, for example, we've seen it with the pandemic. All of us thought we were in control. We were going to school, we were doing our daily jobs, whatever. But the pandemic demonstrated that there will always be factors that are beyond our control that can impact our lives. So, I think something I would tell my younger self is instead of striving to be in control or feel in control, to be perfect or dictate the outcomes of my life. Just put your best foot forward and trust that your strides will get you to exactly where you need to be and that your path is already written. You just have to go along for the journey.
Life is so much more than just a 9 to 5. You need to take every moment and learn how to appreciate the wins and the losses. Today we have one of the most down to earth yet extremely driven women who not only creates waves in her life, but truly makes an impact in others. We have Jasmine Musa, a consultant at IBM. Her holistic approach has helped her to achieve her dreams, goals, and recognize not only the importance of being a leader, but also being a member of any community she is a part of. I also had the pleasure of talking to Jasmine about her success, the necessary steps to get there, and overall the importance of taking care of yourself. So I hope you enjoy this episode of the P Word. So today we have Jasmine Musa joining us from IBM. Jasmine, go ahead, introduce yourself.
Hi, everyone. Jasmine Musa here. I went to university at the Schulich School of Business and I studied international business there, specializing in entrepreneurship. I'm super excited to be here and be with the team today. I know I have a pretty deep relationship with both Rebecca and Raquel, who are on the back end of this. So, really excited to provide any insights that I might have for all your listeners.
Thank you so much for joining us today, Jasmine. So the first question is that I want to ask you is, what are you currently doing in your life? What is Jasmine Musa up to now?
It's a loaded question and I love it. So first off, let's talk about my day job. So I currently work at IBM as a sustainability consultant. And basically my mission at IBM is to help clients transform their sustainability ambitions into action. Outside of work, I'm also doing some fun stuff in the health and wellness sphere. So I'm actually a certified fitness instructor, and I have a fitness community of about 40 to 50 members who gather up for some park workouts. It's a blast. It's so much fun, and it's way more than physical activity, at least in my perspective. So really what we focus on is holistic wellness. We try and incorporate aspects of the mind, body, and soul into each practice. So that's another thing that I have cooking. And then besides that, I am an avid traveler. I'm an avid reader, and I absolutely love going for walks and drinking tea. So a lot of grandma activities on the side.
So those park workouts definitely hit the soul, hit the body, and like always in forms. All right. So Jasmine, what made you decide to pursue the career path that you're currently in?
Okay, so this is kind of a complex question for me because I feel like I didn't really choose it. It chose me. So what happened was I actually interned at IBM as a program management intern for the Summit Sales program. So basically it
Mhm.
was a sales training program and I did this internship for a year throughout my undergraduate degree. It was a 1 year long internship. And basically my role was helping to support two sales training programs. So there was one for interns and then one for new grads. So very much a supporting role, very much project management oriented. And to be completely honest with you, and this is something I've shared with my boss at the time, when I was looking at full-time positions, nothing was really hitting home for me. Nothing was really resonating super deeply. I could see myself doing sales, but I didn't think it would be something that set my heart on fire. I could see myself doing consulting and same thing. I just felt like it wouldn't set my heart on fire. And then this amazing thing happened. 2 weeks before I finished at IBM doing my internship, they actually launched a new practice, and it was the sustainability consulting practice. So the entire practice is dedicated to helping B2B clients, so business to business clients, achieve their sustainability goals using technology. And what I loved about this program, and I'm a big proponent of this, it is the definition of work with impact. Everything we do is really helping to advance the environment and help companies advance their impact on the environment. So I loved that. And then number two, it had a very entrepreneurial culture, this practice, because it was just spinning up.
Yeah.
Basically, everyone who was working on it was an intrapreneur, an entrepreneur within the
Yeah.
organization. And I just love that. The fact that you can really bring your skill sets to the workplace in a way that's super impactful, super scrappy, bootstrappy. It was just a really exciting environment, and I felt like there was a lot of growth potential. So I found something within 2 weeks, of my ending date at IBM that really set my heart on fire, and I was lucky enough to land a position, and here we are today.
And I think that's like really important because of the fact that, especially right before you're about to graduate, it's kind of like a slap in the face, and you're like, what am I gonna do next? Like, what's gonna like be the next move for me? Because I know that was especially a trouble for me right now because of the fact that I'm now in fourth year too. And it was like, oh gosh, like when did this happen? What is like really like the true calling? Because I think that's what a lot of like young individuals really struggle with today because it's like, how are you going to know that this path is for you? Even though you can do like internships, you can do like co-ops and stuff like that, but you only are like exposed to such like a limited field that you're like, "Okay, I could do this," but, like, once you graduate, it's like, "Okay, now the risk management levels are gonna kinda have to, like, balance themselves out because I have bills to pay, I have this to do," and it's like it just starts to pile up, and I think that your story is, like, amazing in that sense because it's like, honestly, it was all just about the right timing for you and, like, meeting the right people in that sense.
Yeah, and Becca, if you don't mind, I would love to chime in here and just say, like, this is such a testament, like, my story is a testament that you have to trust the process. Don't get pigeonholed into pursuing a career path that you think is best for you, because there might be something completely different out there that you never even considered that could come your way, and you might pass the opportunity by if you're not being attentive and being receptive to what comes to you.
Oh,
And then the second thing is, you can't be, overly pigeonholed into the different industries or different job titles that your university teaches you about. As you mentioned, there's a world of possibilities, and if you're open-minded, they'll just come to you.
I 100% agree with that, Jasmine. Now following up with the next question, in your opinion, what do you think is the strongest personality trait to have for working like within your field specifically?
Okay, I love this question. I would say for my field, which is technology and consulting, it's kind of the intersection. It would definitely be intellectual curiosity. And the reason I say that is because tech, as we've seen over the years, changes so rapidly. I was reading a stat the other day about IoT, which is the Internet of Things. And basically, it was saying that the Internet of Things is going to proliferate in a way that people in 2030, I think it was, are expected to have 15 IoT devices each. And if you're wondering what an IoT device is, it's just basically like a physical object that's connected to the internet. So, for example, this Fitbit I have here or an Apple Watch would be an IoT device. So, just crazy growth, and you have to be on top of it because your clients are going to expect you to be the voice of knowledge and reason.
Yeah, that I 100% agree with because if you're not even like, even for yourself, staying curious and learning to grow and constantly or like feeling that urge to want to learn, you're always gonna like stay behind then and you're never gonna actually like move forward and be the best version of yourself in that sense too, which I think is really important. And to add that whole fact about having 15 like IoTs, like honestly, you may think that's like a really big number, but in the grand scheme of things, like in today's society, like that can add up so fast now. So it's definitely something that's like, whoa, but like, can you really blame society today?
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Now the next question I have for you, Jasmine, is what do you think is the biggest like common myth within your field?
Okay. So this one I actually stumbled upon when I was on exchange, and I took a course in consulting when I was in Spain. And basically the myth that I heard over and over again kind of being debunked by the team in Spain was that consulting today is about more than giving expert advice. So a lot of people think about consultants as the people that don't stick around for delivery. And what we're really striving to do now is play a role in delivery excellence. So, for example, the traditional purposes of consulting before, and consulting is the art of giving expert advice, used to be just to provide requested information, provide solutions, to diagnose problems, to really understand them deeply, provide recommendations, and maybe, if you were lucky, assist with implementation. But today, we have the internet. We have so much information at our fingertips. So, what really differentiates good consultants from great consultants is the ability to take on those additional goals, such as building consensus, building commitment with clients to help facilitate client learning, actually getting them to understand the solution and how they can run it in their day to day operations. And then finally, improving organizational effectiveness and culture. So I would say the key myth, just to summarize, would be the fact that consultants don't stick around for delivery, and we really should be moving in the direction of delivery excellence.
I think we're especially seeing that in today's day and age too, because of the fact that just like within the business industry and where like social media is taking us now, it's just like you kind of have to be there for the whole journey and just like create that whole story with the clients that you're working with because like that's what's really going to stick with them is the fact that you started with them from point A and then you finished with them right until the end. You didn't stop halfway, which I think is like really a true testament to how like many jobs within themselves are constantly changing and the requirements for them to like excel. Yeah.
Exactly. It's an end-to-end process, it's an end-to-end journey.
Yeah. And now what would you think like how do you think your parents describe what you do? Yeah. I know this
It's funny.
is so complicated. Like some people have some very interesting positions and it's like if you have foreign parents, they're like gonna be like give you the simplest one worded
Yes,
answer.
yes. So I would say my mom would probably say she works at IBM, if anyone asked. My dad would probably be a step up and he would be like, she works at IBM as a sustainability consultant. And my perspective on this would be I really don't blame them. Like, it's a very niche role. It's a pretty confusing industry for some. It's technology. And a lot of people in the world define their roles in terms of what they do on a day to day basis. So, for example, pilots fly planes. You know what I mean? It's pretty intuitive. But when it comes to consulting, your day to day is completely different and constantly changing. So, it really becomes tough for people to conceptualize what you do because you're not doing the same thing every day. So even for me to explain my role to my parents, I might be able to explain what I did that day, what I'm planning to do tomorrow, what I'm planning to do next week, but at the end of the day, each and every second on the job is quite different. So it's pretty challenging and I don't blame them.
Even as like a marketing person myself, I can fully agree to that too. Cause like each day, oh, we're working on a podcast. Wait, nope, now we got social media things to do. Oh, then there's that.
Yes.
Like it's always a different thing within like this industry. And it's always like, okay, what am I not doing today? Instead of like, am I actually doing today? Because it's just like a lot of things to constantly cover. And I honestly like, yeah, I definitely agree with that. And then if now going back to more of like when you were younger, what would you like ideally go back to your 18-year-old self and say to to them, especially in the position that you are in today?
Mm. I would say two things. Number one, and I've alluded to this already, trust the process. Nobody likes to feel out of control, but the funny thing is control is really just a state of mind. So for example, we've seen it with the pandemic. All of us thought we were in control. We were going to school, we were doing our daily jobs, whatever. But the pandemic demonstrated that there will always be factors that are beyond our control that can impact our lives. So I think something I would tell my younger self is instead of striving to be in control or feel in control, to be perfect or dictate the outcomes of my life, just put your best foot forward and trust that your strides will get you to exactly where you need to be and that your path is already written. You just have to go along for the journey. The second thing I would say is something I learned in a book I read recently called The Happiness Advantage. It's an amazing book, but the big takeaway in the book is that success doesn't breed happiness. It's actually the other way around. When you're happy, you're successful. And one of the biggest keys to happiness that I feel like I used to struggle with when I was younger is social investment. When you're struggling, when you're going through a hard time, what do? Sorry, guys, can't come out tonight. I'm so busy. Oh my gosh, I'm sorry. I really have to study. I really need a closed door kind of evening. Got to put my
Yeah.
head down, do some work. It's actually proven, and in this book, they talk about the science, that social investment is one of the keys to happiness. So when you're struggling or when you're going through a stressful period, don't pull away from your friends. Don't pull away from your relationships. Lean on your network, and they'll help you recharge and actually deliver with excellence in your life.
That was definitely quite a message. I think that's like a true testament, especially to when you're 18 years old and you're going through such like a big change from like even just going to like secondary school to post-secondary school. For some kids, it's definitely more of a lonely process because some of their friends go away. Or for other people, it's like, oh, I'm done school now. What am I gonna do now? And I think that's like really important just even to tell younger kids. Like I know I struggled with that, like within the pandemic myself and even up to now. Like I know sometimes I'm like, oh, I really don't want to go out. Like, I'd just rather
Mhm.
stay in because it's like you think that's going to be your way of like recharging yourself and
Yes.
like version of self care. But in fact, that could just be even more detrimental to your actual growth and like being able to get better in that sense. And I think that like that's even going to stick with me now. But
Yeah.
yeah, that's like really amazing, Jazz. And I think that even like from a young age that I've known you, you have always been sunshine through and through. And it's like truly amazing to see someone that, you literally preach happiness is like to success because of the fact that I've seen it like firsthand. And I think that's really amazing.
It's
So
so
yeah.
true, and one more thing I wanted to add in, I had this professor in university, and thank you for the kind words, by the way, I should pause and say that. I received that, that's really kind of you. But I had this professor in university, and what he told me, he said, "If you don't take," he said this to the whole class, actually. He said, "If you don't take anything away from my class, just make it this. Make it this one thing. Be the person that people are genuinely excited to get into meetings and hop on calls with." If someone is excited to get into a meeting with you, you are shining. You're doing a great job at your job. Just spread positivity, be a voice of happiness and light in your organization, and people will receive that, people will notice that. So, definitely believe I'm a strong believer that happiness does indeed breed success.
And I think it's like really important because even then it's like you don't want to be the pessimistic person within your organization. It's like you want to be the person that every single person can go to regardless of the issue and
Mhm,
you can sit down and be like, okay, let's figure this out together. Let's work on this together and break it down because at the end of the day, it's like your start product and then towards the end is someone else's start product too. So it's like
mhm,
you start, you finish, but then that's someone else's like starting point. So it's like even within an organization, you need to make sure that within yourself and what you're doing is the best product that you can finish off because of the fact that like it's
mhm.
gonna go down to someone else. And it's like even within that, it's like important to like have a good relationship with your coworkers and the people that you're working with.
It's so
And I think
true, and the people really build the culture.
yeah, that I 100% agree on. I think it's just really important that even within like the work ethic culture too, it's important that it's like something that's really healthy and it helps sustain the business itself. Because if that's not there, then it's just a regular 9 to 5, heads down, do what you have to do and walk out the door. And I think that's why so many people our ages kind of stray away from that because of the media and how like especially they kind of portrayed, oh, it's a 9 to 5, why would I want that? And
Mm,
I think that's a really big issue today because it's like you don't have to go to university and you don't have to pursue that career path. But there are a lot of people now who are trying to be that entrepreneur and trying to start their self like start businesses. And I think they do like there are a percentage of people that get that success, but for some it's definitely a struggle and it's like I don't want that 9 to 5 life, but how am I gonna continue this if I'm not successful? And I think that all comes back to the work culture and how that comes like how that's portrayed through the media or even just through like people, like your older friends who are now within these career paths and like they hate it. Like I think that's just like
yeah.
what it is now. And I think that's like something that definitely needs to get better because it's straying a lot of Gen Zs and young millennials from like pursuing these type of like jobs, which are at the end of the day, they're just important to society too.
Yeah, no, I think you're definitely onto something here. It's like we all have this perception that 9 to 5s are kind of like hours of your day that are just dragging by. But that
Yeah.
doesn't have to be true. It's the people who form the culture. And if the mindset in the organization is not that, then the experience is not going to be that. So you lead with your perception, and your mindset is kind of like a fulcrum that impacts how you experience your day to day work.
100%. Yeah. Well, that was like a really good key point. And then within your field, Jasmine, do you think it's mainly male dominant or female dominant?
Great question. So I would say it depends. Tech in general is male dominated.
Yes.
Consulting in general, I actually Googled this because I wasn't sure. It's male dominated. But
Yeah.
at IBM, I have to say, and this is not a sales pitch, but I genuinely feel as though it's not this way. Perhaps it's because I'm in sustainability, and sustainability seems to be, from my experience, more female dominated.
Mhm.
But overall, it feels very balanced from where I'm at. But then again, take these observations with a grain of salt. It definitely varies by company. It definitely varies by geography. And in general, IBM has always been pretty forward thinking in terms of diversity. So I'm kind of getting the cream of the crop in terms of that experience.
But then what about when you were at Schulich? Would you think it was more female dominated or male dominated in that sense?
My program was about 50-50. So I would say it was quite balanced. So I've been very lucky to have had many experiences in diverse cultures from school to obviously now at IBM. So thankfully, diversity and feeling kind of like an outsider hasn't been a huge issue that I've experienced in my professional and academic life.
Amazing. I think that's like, especially something like should like because it is like a smaller group of people, you just have that more like intimate experience. Because like I go to Ryerson, obviously that's a larger university in the sense of like the business management like part of it, and it's just like there's just a wide variety of like races and then like genders now. So it's kind of like okay, so you can't really like in business itself, it's like kind of hard now to tell, okay, that really male dominant or female dominant within like my like cohort and like my schooling too. And
Yeah.
then yeah, no,
No,
continue on.
I just wanted to add on to this, and like you bring up such a good point. When you asked me about the lens of diversity, I was really thinking about it in terms of the male female split.
Yeah.
I would say at IBM, it's also pretty holistic in terms of different cultures. I would say less so at Schulich. At Schulich, there was definitely a couple of nationalities that stood out more to me.
Yes.
Um, so I would say that's also a very important dimension of diversity to think about.
Yeah. And then within your field, how do you think women can continue to support each other and not even that, but like continue to bring the next generation into like consulting and technology together?
Yeah. So I would summarize it into three key buckets, I would say.
Mhm.
First off is through mentorship and buddy programs. So, for example, at IBM, I've been aligned to two amazing powerhouse women. One is considered my buddy, so she's closer to me in age and she's in a similar role. And the other is my coach. And that's literally what we call them at IBM. They're not managers, they're coaches. Both of them have been so extremely approachable, welcoming, and warm, and they provide basically a safe space to get my questions answered and talk about career growth. The second avenue is through organizational groups. So, for example, at IBM, we have this organization called Wing, and it's basically a woman led group that provides social support for other women in the organization. So, personally, I haven't interacted with them yet, but I've heard amazing things, and I actually will be attending a networking event that they have coming up this month. Then the third avenue for women to support other women in this field is just through individual excellence. So if you're a woman and you're
Mhm.
in this industry, be bold, be brave, make a name for yourself, become the example because young women will look up to you and you'll be a form of social proof about what is possible. And then the last thing I'll throw in here, and this is not really about women supporting women, but it's just something that I really believe in. It's the fact that men really have to share this responsibility. So the responsibility of supporting women is, in my mind, a project that requires all hands on deck. We all need to do our part. And I
Yeah.
think a great example of this would be the leader of IBM Consulting Canada. He identifies as a male. He's actually the lead advocate for Wing. So he's one of the main people on the board. So
That's
just
amazing.
examples like that, you know what I mean? It's a all hands on deck kind of job. We all have to play our part. Women, yes, support women. I'm all for that, but also men, all genders, we need your
Yeah.
help. Yeah.
And I think that's like really important. And it's like a great example of how, even within like such a high established like business, it's constantly breaking down those barriers and those stigmas of how obviously men are this and like how men always stick to like, oh, support like their buddy system would probably be with another male or even stuff like that. Like I think that's like a true testament to like breaking down those barriers that can sometimes restrict even like a female or a grown woman to like not want to pursue something because they are too afraid of the gender norms and the societal norms that have been created within that work culture.
Mm, you bring up a good point.
And then within your for yourself, Jasmine, obviously this may be like a very futuristic question, but do you think that there's a lot of societal pressures for women to plan how they will balance their work life in comparison to wanting to start a family? And like how do you think that will affect their career?
Yeah, no, this is a great question and a really important consideration, I feel like, for young women as they choose what they want to do in their career. I would say for me personally at IBM, I don't feel like this kind of pressure is going to play a role in my career.
Yeah.
And this is just thanks to the culture at IBM, which I'm super grateful for. We have so many powerful executive women who have families, who have elevated in their careers and so on and so forth. And IBM doesn't stop them. It really like empowers them. But I would say that this is a testament for young women to choose their organizations wisely and try and find companies that really align with their values and will support their work-life balance. And I'll give you one example at IBM, and then I kind of want to flip the switch to another industry really quick. But at IBM, before I even started, they actually made me sign a work-life balance agreement, which said you don't have to work outside of your designated hours. We respect your work-life balance and understand that the time you spend outside of work is going to impact the quality of your work during hours. So I just thought that was fantastic. But I
What?
did want to switch gears though too, because I worked in the startup industry,
Yeah.
and I think that that's a really interesting space too, where definitely your gender could have an impact on your career success. And there was this one podcast that I listened to about women founders raising funding as business owners, trying to
Mhm.
raise capital for their business. And it was so interesting. I'll never forget this podcast. Basically, what they were saying is the types of questions that women get asked as opposed to men in VC venture capital scenarios, they mostly get asked questions that put them in defense mode. So, for example, um, how do you plan on addressing this group of customers that doesn't seem interested in your product? You're put in defense mode. You have to try and defend your stance versus men typically get asked, this is what the study concluded, questions that put them in offense mode. So it just allows them to drive it forward even more. So, for example, rather than how do you plan on addressing this group that doesn't seem interested in your product, have you considered this group that seems like they might be a great target market? How do you plan to capitalize on them? So what the podcast kind of said is these kind of biases are something that you're going to deal with if you're a female founder. But what you have to do is be the person who can flip that narrative. When you get asked a question that puts you in defense mode, switch your response to offense mode. Promote your product, promote the segments that are working well, promote the opportunities for advancement in your organization or in your company. So I think that at IBM, in that part of my career, it hasn't been relevant, but I've definitely seen the impacts in the startup world. And it's so important for young women to pay attention to the organizations that they're choosing so that they're
Yes.
setting themselves up for long-term success in work-life balance and for family planning purposes, whatever that might be.
I think the first point about IBM making you sign that contract, that's amazing. And I think I haven't heard any other company do something like that. And I think that's truly like a testament to what their beliefs are. And it's great because of the fact that, especially with a lot of startup companies, they have to dedicate a lot of hours. And that's something that truly becomes your whole life. And like, same for myself, starting from somewhere where it's like more of a startup business and like now being here, I definitely see a difference in that too because of the fact that when you're in that mentality, even as a female too, it's very difficult for someone to just even just get the idea that I have this vision. I think that I can get to this point, but
Mm,
there's always going to be, not to like drop like men who are always going to second guess that just because of your sex. And I think that that is just like something that is just constantly trying to be broken down within this industry. And I think it's just slowly but surely starting to get there because there are so many successful young individual
True.
women that have just been, even within the GTA itself, have been able to like surpass a lot of people in their doubts of how far they would go. And then it just like, I just feel like even in that sense, like, I think families for women, especially in today's society, that number is definitely declining, but it's still for some people a very relevant topic is like, am I gonna have kids in the future? How is this gonna affect all my years of studying, even if they went through a master's or a PhD? Like, it's definitely something that's becoming more of like a concern in that sense because it's like before in society, it's like, okay, go to school, get married, have your job, take a break, have kids, and then like resume your life. But it's like now it's like as younger individuals, we're kind of like, oh, I need to like do some things for myself. Like,
Yeah.
how am I gonna improve not only for the people around me, but for myself as well. And I think that's really important in today's society.
No, you bring up a good point. It's like the focus has shifted from this very engraved path of you do
Yeah,
this, then you do this, then you have kids, then you have a family, then you take care of them. But now we've seen so many women kind of challenging that paradigm of thinking and
yeah,
people who have more ambition in the sense that they want to do bigger things with their careers and kind of split up their focus a bit more than what was traditionally done.
100%. And then for someone within your field, Jasmine, are there any strategies that you would recommend to an aspiring professional when it comes to planning a work-life balance, even for yourself now, that you have like your little fitness industry, not little, but your fitness industry
Yeah.
part on it now, and then also you're doing this type of job, and then you have probably a whole other bunch of back end stuff, like probably planning your next trip, aren't you? Like to like do all of that, like, like what are some self-care tips that you would recommend to people in that sense?
I have so many that are coming to mind right now. I'm just trying to focus my attention on a few of them.
Yeah.
The first thing I would say is set boundaries for yourself. So, for example, when I was in university for group projects, I would literally tell people, I'm like, I can't talk past 8 p.m. tonight because I'm going to the gym. And for some people, that might not be a valid excuse. But for me, it wasn't an excuse at all. It was something I needed to do to be productive. So set
Yeah.
boundaries, tip number one. Tip number two, schedule your life like you would schedule your work. So vacation days will never be used unless you put them on the calendar. Massages will never be performed unless you book them on the calendar. So what I would say is make sure you're always scheduling time for you to put items that really matter in your personal life into your schedule. And the book that I was reading recently, The One Thing, that's what it's called, they actually said a quote that really resonated with me. And it said, things which matter most must never come at the mercy of things which matter the least. So make sure priorities are being put on the calendar. The third thing I would say is communication and teamwork are key. So if your plate is too full, talk to someone. Maybe they can alleviate your pressure. If you're not very good at Excel and you have a project where you have to do some complicated Excel formula, which is going to take you like 4 hours to figure out, just ask someone. Slack people if you have Slack in your organization, email people, see if there's someone with skill sets you don't have on your team that can make your life easier. The next thing I would say is practice the art of saying no. Every time you say yes, you're simultaneously saying no. And this is because there's a bunch of possibilities that you're closing off by saying yes. It's like you chose to close one door by saying yes, and all of a sudden, all the other paths have shut as well. So make sure you're being strategic with your yeses and strategic with your nos, because that will free up a ton of your time. The next thing, I'm sorry, I have so many tips here.
Keep on going. I think these are all so good.
Outsource what you don't like doing. So if you hate cleaning and you have the financial means, get a maid. If you spend so much time, for example, doing your eyebrows, let's just say you spend an hour fixing your eyebrows, doing it yourself, just get them done if you don't enjoy doing it. So,
Yes,
wherever you can, just outsource, make it simple, make it fun for yourself, and try and figure out ways to make your life easier in whatever way you can. For example, I know a lot of people use HelloFresh. Maybe they use meal plans. That kind of stuff, if you hate cooking, sounds like a great idea.
literally, yeah.
And then I think I just want to throw in a couple more. Blend
So
work and play. So go out with your coworkers, call your coworkers your friends. What a
Yeah.
different thing it has. Friends versus the people I work with. You
Yeah.
know? It just carries a different energy. So treat your coworkers as friends, be playful, have fun at work. Be the person that people genuinely enjoy, like I said, hopping on calls with, getting on meetings with. And then my last two tips, understand what relaxation means to you. So, for example, I don't like resort vacations. I don't find them energizing. I don't find them fun. I just sit around. I'm like, I feel like a potato. It's not fun for me. I love adventurous vacations, hiking. Oh my gosh, doing like, I don't know, treetop trekking, outdoorsy things. That for me is so invigorating, so energizing. So don't compare your version of play with someone else's. Figure out what recharges your batteries and use that as a means of going on vacation. And then finally, my
All
last
right.
tip
Um,
is understand that the pendulum will swing. So life is never going to be in perfect balance. The pendulum is that the little swingy thing like this. What will happen is if you swing so far to one extreme. So for example, you have an exam, you're studying like crazy, you're studying 9 hours a day, barely sleeping, whatever. What's going to happen after that exam? Whoop, you're not
Literally.
studying at all. You don't touch your books. You're just going crazy, partying, whatever, trying to compensate for all the time you missed. So instead of doing these big extremes, one side to the other, these large sweeping swings, why don't you just try and stay more in the middle? Study for like 3 hours every day, learn in a very balanced manner, try and make sure you're not moving through the motions of life too aggressively, and just settle. And what I would also say is perfect balance is ideal, but it's not necessarily something that's attainable. It's an ideology that we have. It's like this glorious perfection of a state of being. So what I would say is instead of trying to get perfectly balanced, settling that pendulum down in the middle, just try and calm it down, find the right imbalance, get that little swing going, and understand that, yeah, there might be times in your life where you really need to buckle down and work hard, but just focus on coming back to the middle as best as you can. So those are my tips. That was a lot of tips, but I love that topic.
Oh, you gave like amazing tips. I think that's like really important to just take a step away from any situation, any experience, and just focus on what makes you feel good and like what is gonna help you yourself be that better version to help others too. And I think that's where it really starts too, within yourself before you can help others. And I think even like when you're talking about how within group projects are like, okay, 8 p.m. Sorry guys, I can't do it. There's a lot of kids who would be like, "Excuse me, what do you mean you're going to the gym?"
Yes.
It's that's literally a struggle that Raquel, my sister, and
Yes.
I have had to go through because of the fact that it's like,
Yes.
with my parents too, sometimes they don't understand that the gym is like, okay, it's great because it's like it gets your body moving, it's like, you're gonna stay fit, but at the same time, it's just a good way to decompress and like take a moment for yourself. Because
Yes.
at the end of the day, it's like if you yourself are not feeling healthy in any aspect of your life, mentally, physically, or even spiritually, it's kind of like, what am I doing? It's like you're off balance, and it's kind of like you need to recenter yourself first before you can tackle anything on. And I think that's so important, especially even within like being a university student. It's like
Mhm.
the emotion of starting the first day of class, then 4 weeks into it, you're like, oh shit, I've barely read anything. Like, what am I supposed to do now? And it's like midterms are 2 weeks away. Like, take a minute. Obviously, you slacked off for 4 weeks and you gotta be more disciplined now, but it's like you have to start putting things into practice and doing these little motions, like making
Yes.
those little adjustments and those little habits that will eventually like formulate into something larger within itself. I think that's what a lot of people struggle with today too, because they look at the bigger picture without
Mhm.
actually looking within and looking at the smaller segments without overwhelming themselves. And that's
It's
why I think that's what's really hard for a lot of like young individuals today because it's like, oh, I need to get a job, I need to get an apartment, I gotta do this, gotta do that. But it's take a minute, let's break everything down and like
yes.
break
Yes.
everything down by components will help you succeed so much more because it's not even that, it's just like gratification that you get because you were able to at least cross one
Mhm.
thing off that list. And I think yeah, there's gonna be some things that are gonna be more of a delayed gratification, but just think about, like, the moment you're in now, which is so important too, because it's like when you're young, you're kind of like, "Oh, rushing to do this," but it's like, just be in the moment. Li
Yes.
Learn from the experiences, live, recognize the errors you make, and just, like, move on from it. Like, what else can you really do? And, like, experience things for yourself and not others. I feel like it's, like, truly important within this aspect.
Yes, no,
Yeah,
you're onto something so good. That was an amazing summary of what we talked about, honestly,
yeah,
but I honestly have caught myself so many times. I have something on my to-do list, and I'm
yeah.
dodging it, and I don't know why I'm dodging it. And then I take a closer look at it one day, and I'm like, "Why am I avoiding this?" And it's because what I've written down on my to-do list is too big that it's
Yeah,
too scary, and I haven't touched it. So if I
yeah.
sit down on my to-do list, start a podcast, which I did
Oh,
once, I will tell you that, which I did. You're
oh,
not gonna do it. You're not gonna do it if you just wrote down, "Start
no.
a podcast."
It
But
is a work in progress. It is
yes,
such a huge job to do, and I would 100% understand why someone wouldn't want to start it in
it's
that
a
sense.
lot of activation energy. You need a lot of things in order to get started. So what I did was instead of writing down start a podcast, it was research the steps to start a podcast and write them down on a piece of paper just so you
Yeah,
know them. And then
yeah.
from there, once you have the steps, which I did, by the way, with an accountability buddy. I have a friend who's also starting a podcast. Her and I
Amazing.
have been keeping each other accountable with weekly calls. We just wrote down all the steps, compared our lists, and then every week since then, we've just been dedicating about 3, maybe 4 hours a week to chopping things off of that list. And like you said, that gratification you feel when you create a check mark or just say, "Oh, yeah, I'm on step number 5 now." It's great. It keeps you going. It keeps that momentum. It fuels it. So I definitely would agree with you that decompartmentalizing big goals into small and manageable pieces is one of the biggest keys to success in any project.
Yeah. Well, that podcast, I'm gonna be super excited for when I start seeing things on social media, Jasmine. We're super happy for you. I'm guessing is it something within the fitness industry and the holistic views of life?
It is. Yeah, it's holistic wellness.
I love that for you, Jasmine, because I know from a very young age you've always been within this industry. You love that path of life. And I think it's amazing to truly get to see that testament of your life come to action now and sharing it with other people. I think that's going to be, I'll have you on again another time and we can talk all about your holistic wellness. Because even within that, you need to be within yourself, you have to be okay and healthy to continue all aspects of your life. And I think that will truly be an amazing segment to talk about in the
Yeah.
future.
No, it's so true. I read a quote today, and I don't know if I'm gonna remember it exactly. It was on LinkedIn, and shout out to the practice leader of sustainability for IBM Canada because she posted it, and I remember thinking, "Wow, I'm so lucky to work for someone with this ideology and this mindset." But she said, "If you don't make time for wellness, I promise you, you'll eventually have to make time for illness."
100%. That was wow, that was that just is
I
hitting me so
know,
hard now.
I
That was
know.
amazing. No, like that's literally so true with like even just life itself today. There's so many uprising illnesses coming. The habits of like eating are just not great anymore. Like, yeah, this is just wow. That quote's just gonna stay with me though.
I know. Let's let that sink in.
I'm just thinking it even more now. Yeah. Well, on to my next question, Jasmine. How would you describe yourself? An introvert or an extrovert?
I am definitely more of an extrovert.
I
However, you actually have quite a few introverted tendencies. Like I love and I value time where I'm just by myself. I go for morning walks all the time. And I used to always listen to podcasts and stuff like that, but lately, just me walking, admiring the leaves changing colors, and I love reading, which is obviously more of an introverted activity.
yeah,
But yes, I would say definitely an extrovert, but a lot of introverted tendencies.
I definitely agree. Especially as you get older, you just kind of need a couple moments to yourself just to even decompress and just like, okay, this is my me time. What are we gonna do to make myself feel better and enjoy my time that I have right now just for myself? And I think that's like really important, especially as you get older, because it's like you spend all of like your teenage years hanging out with friends, and it's like, okay, that was fun, but like I have a job now. I have other responsibilities. When is it my turn just to like, you know,
Yeah, just
take a
chill
moment?
out. I think I value the introverted activities most during transitions. So for
Yeah,
example, after work, before I see people, I feel better if I go for a walk. Or
yeah,
in the morning before I start communicating with people and hopping on my email, I feel better if I read a book. So
yeah.
just like spacing it out. But I wanted to throw the question back at you. I know I'm not the interviewer, but what are
Oh,
you
go
more
ahead.
of an extrovert or introvert?
See, I think as I've gotten older, I'm definitely more of an introvert. I used to get a lot of energy off just like people, but now I definitely am like okay within myself and doing things like by my own as well. And I think that's like even like I have extrovert tendencies. Like I'm okay to go and approach someone and be like, "Oh, hi, how are you?" Like have those like conversations and like get to know a person. But at the same time, I do like my alone time. Like even after work, like I just need a minute to like shut
Mhm.
down, which I think is super important. Just because it's just the way my brain functions after a full workday. I'm kind of like, oh,
Yeah.
that was a lot of socializing for me today. Let me just take it back now for a
Yeah.
minute and just like keep it calm. But yeah.
Mhm.
So speaking of books, what are your 3 favorite books that you would recommend to the audience?
I love this question because I love books. So the first book I'd recommend is one that a friend gave me.
Mhm.
She read it, she thought it was amazing. It's called The Happiness Advantage. And I've talked about it a little bit in this podcast through some quotes, through some teachings, but basically I'd recommend it because it will teach you that happiness breeds success and that it can actually help fuel your performance in the workplace.
Yeah.
The second book I recommend, which I'm reading now, but I'm loving it so far, is 101 Essays That Will Change the Way You Think. This book
Oh,
was
that one.
spontaneously gifted to me. Have you read it?
No, I keep on seeing it, and I keep on seeing a lot of quotes and like certain segments of the book on social media. I'm like, I think I need to buy this book.
It's so good. It was gifted to me so spontaneously. One of my friends sent it to me through Amazon just randomly, and it made my day. I was like, "Oh my gosh, you are so thoughtful." But then in addition to this book was on my radar for so long, and I'm really grateful it's finally in my hands.
Yeah,
So I would definitely recommend it because it's a self-help knowledge goldmine. Enough said.
you're definitely gonna
The
make me want
last
to buy.
No, it's great. It's a great book. And then the last book I'd recommend is The Atomic Habits by Jane.
That right now.
Are you reading it?
It's obvious like the start of the book is such a testament to his story. I just like obviously like, I'm a couple pages in like chapter 1, chapter 2, like I'm
Mhm.
in there at that range, but it's just a great read overall so far that I've started.
Good. But basically, it just teaches you how to build amazing habits and get rid of habits that aren't serving you.
Yeah.
And there's a couple of quotes by James Clear that I really wanted to share.
Go
And
ahead.
there's two. Every action that you take is a vote for the person that you wish to become. Number
That's true.
two, habits are the compound interest of self-improvement.
I 100% agree with that. I remember reading that one specifically, and I was like, "This is just a true testament." Like, you need to be able to like compound your life in a way that you're going to be able to grow exponentially, and you're not always obviously exponentially could just be like a small percentage, but it could still be a
Yes.
eventually grow into something at large. And I think that's like what people need to, back to a point that I spoke about. People need to focus in that moment, like started here, but now I'm here. And I think that's
Mhm.
like truly amazing. Definitely, I'm gonna finish that book and then start with the 101 essays. I think
Yes.
those are definitely see that. I haven't heard about your first recommendation though, but I'm definitely gonna look into that one because sounds just as interesting from hearing all these quotes you've been throwing out here today. And then another thing I want to ask you, Jasmine, is what do you think is like the greatest productivity hack for yourself and even working with entrepreneurs that you have in your past?
It's very on brand with what we've been talking about.
Yeah.
But I would say, and it rhymes too, which is the best part, lead with self-care and you'll get there. That's it. I would say when we're sleeping well, we're performing better. When we're eating well, we're performing better. When we're moving our bodies are happy. They'll perform better. So honestly, one of the biggest ways that you can optimize and improve and enhance your performance as a person in the workplace, as a person with a passion, as a person pursuing some sort of craft is through personal development because you're only as great as you are feeling. You can only perform as wonderfully as your body, your mind, and your soul are feeling. So that is my advice.
That was a great piece of advice, and I think that that really just shows a testament to who you are as a being and like what you can do to inspire others around you. And then the last thing I wanted to ask you, Jasmine, is one of my last questions I have is if you were to write a book or even a persuasive essay, what would it be about?
Oh my gosh, I love this. I would definitely write a book. That is on my bucket list. It needs to happen in this lifetime for me. But the
Yeah.
book would be very like related to the podcast that I'm building. And I
Mhm.
think the title would be, if I were to manifest it right now, The Roots of Holistic Wellness, Advancing the Mind, the Body, and the Soul.
Damn, you already have that all set in stone. I love that. I definitely think that if you ever do make this book, I will be one of the first things that will be in line to get it signed by you.
Oh, you're the best. That means the world.
And then lastly, goes my last question for you is what do you think the world is gonna look like in 50 years? Even for yourself or even as a society as a whole.
Mm, okay. I would say my tech answer as part of the tech industry would be it will include a lot more people doing creative work and
Mhm.
a lot less people doing repetitive tasks that are hopefully going to be outsourced almost entirely to machines. So I think in general, our people in society will become even more human in the way that they work and do their daily life. So instead of doing the same intake form, let's say, every day, or
Yeah,
instead of doing the same records for, I don't know, like audit or risk or whatever every single day, people are going to be getting a lot more creative and working a lot more harmoniously with machines and technology. So that's kind of my vision for how the future will play out. And what I'm hoping is that in the future, we're going to get better at managing the information overload and the amount of distractions around us. So, right now, we're in a phase where information and content and I
yeah.
don't know, everything is just taking over. Like, we have social media and like our attention spans are declining.
Oh,
And
yeah.
this is all fine and dandy, but I think the next phase and the next paradigm for humans is how do we manage all of this information and take it in a way and integrate it into our lives where it's more manageable. So hopefully that will lead to a less distracted society. Hopefully it'll
Yeah.
lead to humans that are really able to get down and dirty with their craft and with their creativity. But that is my optimism for the future.
Raise a really good point because even just in today's society, we're already starting to automate so many things that were once such like a hassle to constantly do. And I do agree that eventually, hopefully, in the next 50 years, we get to a point where there's majority of things that are a hassle now get automated. But even then, it's just like your point about how social media and the content creation, like everything is a trend now. And it's gotten to a point where that saturation is just like, even when I'm
Mm,
on TikTok, I get overwhelmed now because I'm like, there's just so much going on. It's kind of like, okay, like I don't even know what's on trend anymore because it's like everything's in trend now. So it's kind of like, so I definitely do hope that hopefully we manage a way to like connect this and being a human being together because of the fact that there's a lot of people who definitely get consumed by social media and all that content and that information that's offered in the world. But it's like let's be in reality. Let's be in touch with ourselves too, which is also just as important as being able to collect all those information.
I love this point that you just brought up. The word saturation really resonated with me that you said. I think
Yeah.
that's so true that we are very saturated. And what I would say is like, if you're catching yourself super absorbed by social media, know you're not alone and
Yeah.
know that's normal. It's designed and it's meant to be addictive. It's meant to send off dopamine hits to your brain like nothing else before. It's normal, but just bear in mind that you have the power to create habits, for example, that support you and keep you protected in a mental state. So you're not alone. Just recognize it and work on it. I know I've been guilty of it too, but do things for yourself. If you need to, create barriers, delete the app just so you
Yeah.
have to download it to log back in. Those kind of interventions will help support your mental health and help support you to operate in a more focused, less distracted manner.
Yeah, you raised a really good point there, Jasmine. Well, I wanted to thank you so much for being on this episode with us. It was truly a pleasure to have you a part of the P word. Thank you so much, Jasmine.
Anytime. Thank you for having me.
Bye.
Thank you so much, Jasmine, once again for joining us on the P word. I hope that Jasmine's view of life propels you to learn how to trust the process and believe that what's meant for you will reach you as long as you yourself are open to the opportunity, and that in order to achieve great things, you need to look within yourself and recognize what are your winning points and what are your pain points. Once again, guys, thank you so much for joining us on this week's episode of the P Word. We really hope you enjoy it. Also, be sure to stay tuned for next week's episode as we bring in another guest as they talk about their fascinating fields. Be sure to like, follow, and subscribe. See you next week.